Hello and welcome to your weekly podcast from Freestyle Media in partnership with the Magic 5, where you can get 15% off a pair of their custom fit goggles by using the link in the description to this episode. Do also check out Oxalt Strength and Conditioning. That's Nathan Oxford. And in the new year, he'll be offering at-home bodyweight programs for those people who don't have access to a gym. And we all know that he gets great results for his swimmers. So do check out his stuff at www.oxalt.com. So this week is part two of technology in swimming, which is also going to be split into two parts. It's hard to find the time in the diary for all of us to get together, but we'll make the best of it. So joining us for the first half of this episode is Jamie McHale. Sorry, how are you, mate?
Good, thank you, Joe.
Good. And it's a nice little debut for David Westcough. So thank you for coming on the podcast, mate.
Having me.
No, you're welcome. It's good to have you. So look, in this first half, I want to move the conversation on a little from the one that we had previously. So last time we talked about technology that we were currently using, and then we kind of dreamed up these like scenarios of a world without limits. We had smart pools, we had all sorts of stuff going on. But today what I want to do is kind of get your thoughts on really the technology that you could use, that you don't currently use, that you actually think could genuinely improve your training and therefore your swimming. I'm open to most things in this conversation, so do cut loose. And just for context, in the second half of the episode, I'll be joined by two coaches, and they'll be discussing their views on technology and how they use them for their swimmers. But Jamie, just give us a very, very quick debrief on the tech, or if any tech that you do currently use, and then we'll move the conversation on from there.
So at the moment, I use a Garmin Fenix watch. So I've been using that. I've been using a Garmin Fenix for about 5 years now, and I find it just really good because it breaks. So it records all my sessions, breaks all the reps down, so I know what times I'm doing for each rep, and it gives me a heart rate. Although as a wrist heart rate watch, it's probably a little bit lower than what a chest strap one would be, but it's still pretty accurate, and it'll give you accurate graphs and what have you. As the session goes, to using it, all I do is press a button each time I set off on a rep, and it gives me a 3-second countdown, and then I press it again when I finish each rep, and then it gives me a time, and then I just set it off again each time. So I've got used to that now. It sort of took a little bit getting used to start with, but now I get used to it, and I don't always look at what times I'm doing during the session. I think the main thing is sort of looking back at it, and then later on, sort of in the year, if I do a similar set, I can sort of compare and contrast sort of how I'm doing at that time of year, see if I've sort of better in my times and see what my heart rate is for that set and stuff like that. And I just find it really good, and I download it onto Strava, and then it's all on there sort of thing. So yeah, if it's not on Strava, you didn't do it.
No, absolutely. No, that sounds really good. And actually, I have a Garmin as well. And I've said this before. I don't actually wear it anymore. I haven't wore it for a while. But I think mine must have been a generation below yours, because I don't get it. It disables the heart rate monitor when you go into swim mode, because it just doesn't have that capability. So I do get the chance to kind of record each rep, if you like. And when I put it on Strava, you can sort of see the breakdown of the splits, but I didn't have the heart rate. But David, same question to you really, is what are you currently using, if anything at all?
So I use the Whoop 4.0 health tracker. So a little bit different to a Garmin watch, and also similar in the sense that it tracks the heart rate. However, it doesn't really track swim times, what I do in the pool, or how many lengths. Actually, the GPS system is quite bad, and if I look back at it, it will have me swimming out on the road according to its little map. So not very handy for that. But I think the main thing that I like to use it for is understanding calories, how many calories I've burnt off, and how much strain I've put on my body during a session, just to not to inform that individual session itself, but over the course of the week to try and understand how hard am I working this week. Should I take it a little bit easier today, or should I really push myself hard? And I think actually the best thing for it is not for actually the swimming itself, but actually monitoring sleep. and yeah, just helping me to understand how well I've slept the night before, and therefore, again, that then feeds into how hard can I push myself on the next day. So yeah, it's more of a general health tracker, and yeah, just to help me understand how hard to push it on any given day, be that in the pool or in the gym or both.
I mean, that's really interesting. I've heard a few people now talk about that particular device that you've got there. Have you ever overridden the data? Has it ever kind of said, hold back a little bit today, but you've actually felt really in the mood, and have you ever just thought, no, I'm going to go for this?
Yeah, there are times. Admittedly, it's very rare where I kind of think, yeah, I'm not quite sure that's totally accurate. I think that I've had a little bit better night's sleep than it's telling me. But 99 times out of 100, it's really good. And I think actually where it's been really really good is back in October, or no, mid September, when I was starting to feel a little bit ill and under the weather. Some of the things that it tracks, such as heart rate, respiratory rate when sleeping, and that sort of thing, was coming back as this is a little bit different. You might be feeling a little bit strained, and a few days or so later, I was really feeling it, and it was it essentially led me to it let me know that an illness was potentially on its way, and I should have listened to it a little bit more, and taken things easy, because I was 2 weeks doing low intensity training, right at the peak of when you wanted to be training hard for nationals, but it's been very good in that sense as well, and most of the data is incredibly good and accurate.
That's really freaky that it was like essentially telling you you're about to have a cold or whatever. Like
Yeah.
my trigger is always, because everybody kind of has different symptoms. Whenever I sort of have a cold or a bit of man flu or whatever it may be, there's always a moment in the day where I just suddenly feel like a little lump at the back of my throat, and I just think, oh, something's coming, and
Yeah.
that's always my trigger. So that's really interesting. But moving the conversation on then, Jamie, let's talk about, as I say, what we think could genuinely improve our training. So you said you use a Garmin watch. Have you ever considered using anything else? And again, want to try and be realistic with this, because we could have all the tech in the world. We could use all the stuff that the pros use, but realistically, we're just not really going to have access to a lot of this stuff. So, like, given like what David's just said there, a general health tracker, for example, is that something you'd consider using, or anything else that you've heard from the other people in part one?
My Garmin actually tracks sort of HRV and my pulse rate at night time. It knew that I'd had the COVID jabs a few weeks ago, because my pulse rate went up probably about 10 beats per minute over about 2 days.
Wow.
So it's about 2 days, and then it came back down again. So things like that, and sort of it tracks my sleep as well, and it tells me how bad I'm sleeping, or how late I've slept and I need a few more hours. But yeah, so things like that it does track, and I do sort of look at HRV, and I probably would, if it's sort of out of limits, I would sort of take it a bit easier and listen to my body a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Would you ever consider, I mean, obviously, because the club environment that you swim in, you've got plenty of members. Abby seems like the sort of coach that would be willing to try stuff. Would you ever consider, like, sort of going around the houses or the swimmers and saying, if we all just put a bit of dough in, we could actually buy some kit for poolside, some tech, whether it's cameras in the water or something like that? Would you ever consider something like that? Do you think that would be quite helpful to you guys?
I'd really like cameras. Yeah, I think cameras are good, because you can listen to the coach. The coach can't always watch everybody, and also sometimes I think if you're looking at yourself swimming, it's not how you think you're swimming. You look different to what you think you're swimming like, and sort of underwater cameras looking at sort of that high elbow. Things like that, and sort of how you're swimming through the water, sort of hand entry and things like that would be really useful. Yeah, and I think now with sort of GoPros and what have you, that technology isn't as expensive as what it used to be. Sort of 20 years ago, I know it's come down quite a lot. And yeah, I would be definitely interested in something like that. Yes.
No,
Yeah,
I'd
interesting.
absolutely. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'd absolutely, absolutely love cameras. Doing a little bit of videoing of my races myself. I think the one thing that I always realise when looking back at race videos is that my arm turnover rate is nowhere near as quick as I think it is in the pool.
Same here.
Yeah, and it's you look at other people and you think they're going around at turtle speed, and when you're actually in the water, you're really trying to throw them over as hard as you can, and it's so handy for just so handy for understanding what you're actually doing with your stroke. And I think the key obstacle with that is not necessarily the either the expense or actually getting the equipment itself. It's how you integrate that in sort of the session, or even a public swim for those that do it in public swim sessions. And yeah, I think that's the key obstacle there, but otherwise we'd absolutely love to have that kind of tech.
So I know, David, you do a mixture, don't you, of I think you said earlier you have kind of one club session a week, and then the rest of them are all kind of done in a public session. So obviously the difference between those two would be that in a club session you could probably have more stuff on
Yeah.
poolside or whatever, and as in a public session you're going to be a bit more careful. If you train with fellow teammates in those kind of public sessions, I mean, it's not really possible, is it, to sort of take your phone on poolside and say, look, sorry, lifeguard, we're just going to do a couple of 25s max out. I'm going to film him once, then he's going to film me. It's an adult lane swimming session, so there's no kids around. I mean, I've never really had that conversation with the lifeguard, but I mean that would be really helpful, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of one way. How do you even approach that conversation slash start that. Yeah, it's obviously, I think we'd all be wanting to do it innocently, and all we'd actually care about is looking at ourselves and our stroke rate and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's just I don't know how you'd integrate that into the current pool environment. I think we've done it in a couple of on a couple of occasions when we've had club training sessions. Because it's you've got a few lanes, you can keep the camera to yourself. It's relatively you can do that sort of thing a lot easier, and obviously some of the other clubs in other lanes are used to that sort of thing as well, where it's integrating that in like a public swim session where I struggle to see how that would come together.
Definitely. Jamie, there are new sports goggles out on the market now that I know have been kind of really pushed with triathletes, and where you literally see data in your goggles. So sort of that kind of infrared style data. I don't know if you've really looked into these, but generally, instinctively, what do you kind of think to that, and do you think it will take off in our sort of competitive swimming sport?
I think I did actually look at these. It's probably about 2 years ago when I was buying my Garmin watch, and I think the price was a bit prohibitive, sort of, for wearing them just for training and how long goggles last me. So I think that sort of put me off a little bit. But sort of seeing the data while you're swimming is an interesting one, because you can actually see how fast you're swimming. You can see all the splits and what have you, and while you're actually doing it. So it's not something I discount, but I discounted it just because of the fact that the cost of it and how long the goggles would last me. So I think if I wore the goggles every day at training, they'd probably only last me 6 months or so, something like that, until they just get fogged up all the time too much.
Completely agree. And obviously, Jamie, you swim in a club environment. You've got a coach, you've got your teammates. Do you think that those goggles would actually get in the way of that club experience and that culture?
Yeah, they could do. I think one thing I'd like to see sort of in the future is maybe taking use of the electronic timing, and if you could find a way of having a lane using the electronic timing and getting sort of a stopwatch off each person setting off, so they get a time at the end of it, and then maybe you could download it all and you could see all your splits and everything at the end of the session and things like that. I think that'd be really good. And
And
the
that's
coach could see it as it's going as well. But I think you'd need sort of a separate monitor for each lane, and sort of, I don't know how you do it, but each time person sets off, I don't know, something goes off and their name's on there. So each person's got a split for that, for each rep and everything. I think that'd be quite good. And I don't think it'd be impossible to do either. I think it needs someone more tech wizardry than me to be able to come up with a program that would work with.
it's a cracking idea, because when you think at the end of at some point during a club session, you might say, right, we are actually going to do some stand-ups here. And actually, it's quite a manual process, of course, but if you design a start list similar to one of a competition, again, this would require you to know who's turning up to training. So you could actually produce this, but you could in theory line it up so that you could have the names on the scoreboard as you would in a race. So you do a 50 or 100 or whatever it may be, and you get to look up and see your time. And then as again with competitions, you'd go on the live results and you'd look at your splits. You can actually...
They definitely use them in America, and I'm guessing that Bath and Loughborough and Stirling will probably use them as well in training, I would have thought. But yeah, I've seen videos of them in America using them. So with Brett Hawke's videos and some of Sonny's videos as well in America. Yeah,
it's a great idea.
Yeah.
David, obviously, when you think about your when you train alone or in a public session, even if it is with a teammate, for example, do you think this is where tech lends itself slightly, a little bit more? Because I alluded to it earlier with Jamie to say that, for example, those tech goggles, it could just kind of get in the way of the fact that you've got all your teammates around you and a coach trying to talk to you. Do you think actually tech's probably better when you're on your own? It's more helpful?
I think so. That was something that I hadn't considered. Obviously, using those sort of goggles in a coach session environment. I do think that there is a danger there of, you're paying attention to, the inside of your goggles as opposed to, your coach and what you're telling you. And coaches typically will take splits for you with a stopwatch and let you know. And I think for me that was the main interest in those types of goggles. For me, it wasn't the price for me wasn't necessarily inhibitive, although it was a little bit eye watering. But I thought as a sprinter doing the the 50s and 100 events mainly, ultimately what I wanted was a watch. Not a watch. Well, any sort of timing mechanism that could tell me my splits on my own, without anyone else's support, but right down to the 10th of a second, or even better, 100th of a second. And when I took a look at those, I think they're Form watches is the brand that I was looking at. It was to the second, which is brilliant if you're a long distance swimmer, if you're a triathlete, where those bigger time differences are obviously going to be a lot more obvious. You're going to get more bigger time differences in your training sessions. But in the 50s and 100s, where you're really getting things down into the tenths, if not hundredths of a second, then I thought, it's not quite. It's not. I'm not getting the value that I want there, because I can just look up at the clock essentially, and I can get it either. I can get it to the nearest second, and depending on how good you are at that sort of thing, you can either say, it's a high this or a low this, depending on whether you just see the number tick over or not. So yeah, it's. I think I'd love some of those American systems, and how I sort of pictured it is one of those those buttons on a plinth in Ninja Warrior, where you code in whatever event you're about to
Yeah.
do. You press the button, and then it simulates a race setup. So it will give you 10 seconds to get ready, or do the 3 whistles, then do the 1 whistle, take your marks, go, and then you've got touch pads in the water. And then after you swim, you can completely replicate a race situation by yourself. And I think for myself and other swimmers like me, I think that would be so handy, is to actually know how well you're going in the pool, and whether you're shaving those tenths or hundredths of a second off.
I think that's a cracking setup. I love the sound of that. So final question to you both. Jamie, look, you don't know what you don't know. It ultimately with anything in life, and obviously there could be some tech that just comes out tomorrow that changes our lives. But I often think about this from a point of view of just generally our lives and technology, and we're also addicted to our phones now because they're so advanced that they just do everything for you and all the rest of it. But do you feel like with, I guess, where you're at in swimming, I mean, bar some of the few things that we've just talked about and the brilliant point that David just made there, how much tech do you think, or sorry, how much do you think you could actually improve with all this new tech that we could potentially have in the future? Or do you think it's just a case of you just got to turn up and train hard?
I think definitely training hard is definitely the main thing, sort of getting the sessions in. But I think tech such as video analysis and things like that can improve your stroke. Seeing what times you do and things like that doesn't necessarily improve you that much, but it's good to know, and it's good to see where you're at and to compare yourself, like I do sometimes, see where you're at. And so I think if we didn't have any of the technology, would I go as fast as what I'm doing now? Probably. But it's just nice to sort of see what you're doing and look back as well.
And David, do you agree with Jamie there? I think I'm on the same page as Jamie in that things like senior times is definitely a nice to know, and it can give you confidence going into a race, especially if you've been hitting some pretty decent times in training. I think for me, I again completely agree with Jamie that video analysis is the one thing I would love to have, but I'm actually not that bothered about anything else. What about you?
I mean, it depends how wacky you want to go with this, but I completely agree. First and foremost, with at this point in time, there's no substitute for the hard training. You need to put in the reps to get faster. There is, at this point in time, there's no there's no getting around that. And whilst video analysis,
well, no, that's not quite correct. There is steroids.
Go on. Well, yeah, okay, fair enough. But I mean, but even then, you still actually need to get in and swim. It's not a case of taking the steroids, yeah. So if you're going really futuristic and wacky, then maybe a training suit that you zip on a bit like a wetsuit, and it motors your arms for you, so then you actually get the feel of, actually, this is how my arms need to rotate in the water. This is how I need to kick. This is how I need to do butterfly kick. So you get the feel for going that fast. But obviously, I'd hope they'd be illegal for the race, because it's just, it'd just be a sense of, this is how it should feel to swim this fast. Okay, right, fine. I know what it now feels like. I've now actually got to get in and replicate that with my body. But yeah, the video analysis is great, because at this point in time, it's the best thing we've got in analysing our stroke and thinking about it and changing it. And one thing I agree with James Barwick, on part 1 of the podcast is, the feel for the water. Ultimately, when you're thinking about your stroke, that's when you get fastest. And I think I've struggled a little bit this year in thinking about tech too much, thinking about times too much, when in reality, what you really need to be focusing on is your stroke, because that's it. The feedback from the watches and that sort of thing, lets you know how well you're doing and whether you're making the right tweaks to your stroke. But ultimately, when you're actually swimming the race, you need to be focusing on what you're doing and how you're executing that swim.
Yeah, I love the bodysuit ideas. It's a cracking idea. You can almost pre-program the time you want to swim, and it kind of
Yeah,
just motors you to
it
swim.
does you
Yeah,
too. Yeah.
I think that's brilliant. Really, really good suggestion there. Just before we leave part one, David, you do have a YouTube channel, and
I do.
everybody should get involved. Do you want
Thank
to tell
you.
people about that?
Yeah, so it's a sharing the story of my campaign to become a better sprint swimmer. I've named the series "Make Me Proud," which hopefully the swimming pun is evident there. My events are 50 free in fly and 100 free as well. So it's just sharing my experiences. Mainly it's looking at my races, doing some technical analysis back and that sort of thing. And yeah, it's on YouTube it's at David Westcough. And it'll be obvious because it's me in my hat with a picture from me at National. So I'd much appreciate if you check me out and give me a subscribe. But no, thank you, thank you very much. Yeah, that's very kind of you to give for the shout out.
No, not at all. It's always good to see swimming content out there, and hope the channel goes well.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you to Jamie, thank you to David for this first half, and we'll now move on to the second half. And as if by magic, it is the second half, and I am joined by John Wood, swimmer and coach, of course, as we all know. And John, just before we get stuck into all of the technology chat, what a time you had out in Madeira! Congratulations. You must be feeling great.
Blown away. It's still a week afterwards, and it's still sinking in. The last swim was a week ago today. I can't believe quite how quick I was swimming. It felt good. Don't get me wrong, but I didn't realize I was swimming that quick. So 3 lifetime bests is not something you expect to do at 37.
It's unbelievable, but it's unbelievable though I can believe it because we'd been chatting in the month or two leading up to it, and you were adamant that this was your big meet of the year. Despite going to nationals and other things like that, you were like, "This is the big meet for me." So you went in with that mindset of like, I mean, business.
Yeah, very much so. I think it's an odd one to say I'm going to British Champs or British Nationals, and that's not the focus for me. And that's not to do any disservice to British National, because for most people that is the big one. But you pick and choose your events, and we've talked before about you only have a certain number of events that you can work towards over a year, and I'd chosen Madeira to be the one. So it was nice to do the relays at Sheffield. That was my focus, and I still swam quickly. I was very, very happy with how I swam in Sheffield, but knowing that there was a bit more in the tank to come was great.
No, for sure. All right, so let's get back onto the topic of technology then.
Yeah.
So I want to look at this from a coach's point of view,
Sure.
if that's okay, despite you being an insanely quick swimmer. But I suppose you'll be able to relate to putting yourself in the shoes of swimmers that you are coaching. First and foremost, just tell us about any sort of technology that you use as a coach when you're coaching your clients.
So what's really interesting is I bought myself a sports watch that I can use to swim with. So I use a Coros watch. I mean, it's the same as Garmin and TomTom and all the rest of that. I bought it to swim with because I want to see what my clients swim with. Most of them are triathletes, but I do have a couple that I'm writing swim plans for, especially endurance swimmers. And it is interesting because sports watches aren't as accurate as maybe you'd like them to be. I know when you put the post out on the Facebook group about technology and watches and that sort of thing, my response was, I'm not the hugest fan of them because I find people fiddle with them too much, and it takes the focus away from why you're swimming. And I know James said this last time as well. So if I'm coaching someone who's wearing a watch, my suggestion is to always press the button and then think about swimming. Yes, okay, it might mean that you're adding an extra second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds on at the start of a swim and then finishing, hitting the wall and then pressing the button at the end. So it's not super accurate if you're trying to be dialed in. But at the end of the day, the time is not the important bit. That's just a measure. That's a record of what you've done. As a coach, I use a system called Sona Pro. So funnily enough, you were talking last time about being able to communicate with swimmers in the water, or coaches being able to communicate with swimmers in the water. There are a few different products out on the market, but the Sonar Pro that I use, it's got a Bluetooth connection, so you've got a walkie-talkie and a pod that either clips to your goggles or sticks under your swim cap. And it means that you can talk to the swimmer and as they're swimming, so you can give feedback, you can or technical feedback, you can give splits if you want. You can actually connect, I think it's 8 pods you can connect to one walkie-talkie. So actually you can broadcast to everybody. So you could say, and this isn't something I have the opportunity to do because I'm only doing one-to-ones predominantly, but you could say, right, I want everybody to think about standing up tall and keeping good posture as you push off the wall or whatever. Or you could give a call for everyone to sprint. So you might be doing some sort of interval session based on time. So they could be swimming up and down, nice and easy, and you go, right, you're going to sprint in 3, 2, 1, and everyone, wherever they are in the pool, is going to put the effort in. The thing that I have to remember as a coach is that I don't have to give someone a running commentary. And it's really important, like the whole thing with technology and kit as well, whether it's fins, paddles, whatever, they are tools. They are not there to be used all the time. Mm-hmm. Yes, you can use them to help you swim fast, and there is a real benefit to those things. And it's the same with the Sonar or your watch. I can give a little bit of feedback, but actually, as a coach, I wanted to see people get things wrong. That might sound really odd to say, but I want to see people get things wrong because I want to then see if they can correct from that. As a coach, or also as an athlete, actually the benefit is being able to change things and get them right. You know, it's lovely if you can do things perfectly all the time. You know, that's great, but you don't necessarily learn as much from that. Whereas if you get things wrong and are able to correct it, it tells your brain that you've got the capability to do that. I learned to row 10 years ago, and if you the technical term is catching a crab. So if the blade gets stuck under the water, you can almost get pinged out the boat by that. And you'll see it in, like, if you watch the boat race and stuff, sometimes that happens. But you've got 7 other men or women who are rowing along and trying to race. You haven't got time for everyone to set and stop and get back into the rhythm. You've just got to join in with everyone as quickly as possible. And the same thing happens when you're swimming. If you're swimming freestyle and you swallow water, you're not going to stop in the middle of a 50 or a 400 or a 5K swim and go, hang on, guys, I need to stop and clear my throat. It's like, how can you deal with that as quickly as possible? And that goes to even the smallest of technical issues. So whether that's overextending or whether that's getting a bit flat and scuffing the water or whatever it is, those little mistakes, if you can correct them on the fly, that's really important. And so sometimes you just need a little reminder, and that's what I have to remember with using the kit. The benefit actually with the Sonar Pro is when I use it open water, it's got a range of 650 meters. So the lake that I coach at in Bristol, it's a 650 meter loop, but I can walk around the edge while somebody's swimming, and I'll be maybe 100 meters from someone. And I can give them technical feedback, or I can say, right, okay, you're going to swim to the next buoy, and then we're going to change what we're doing. Or you're going to do some drill, and then you're going to go swim. And you can see the changes as they go along, which is a really useful tool.
See, I love it, and I'm really glad that these things exist. I did think they probably would exist, and I think from my point of view, the reason why I mentioned it on the first part of this podcast was simply that I'm somebody who I really benefit from having an engaged coach.
Yes.
And I agree, I wouldn't want a running commentary, it would lose its effect. But what I would really benefit from is if we were doing, some kind of set, even if it was sprint sets, I'd love a coach to just get in my ear for a split second and say something like, just remember your hand entry, Joe. If they started to notice it was going a bit off, just a small comment halfway through a swim, and I'd be like, right, I've got to remember, or even just we need a bit more from you here, Joe.
Keep it going. You need that encouragement.
Yeah, exactly. And it's little tidbits like that I think are fantastic.
Yeah.
So so that's really interesting. So you said you have a watch that you use. Obviously, you're assuming you wanted to know what your clients use. What other than watches, is there anything else that your clients like to bring to a session that you kind of have to then factor in as a coach?
So Not really, apart from the toys, whether it's the fins, the paddles, the TikToks, or the various different shapes of paddles. What I've been seeing recently, there's a company called EO. I don't know whether that's actually how you pronounce it, but it looks like EO. And there's Tritonware as well, and they seem to measure power. So if anybody who's listening is a cyclist, you'll know that power is kind of the prime metric for measuring cycling output. And it's kind of coming into running as well, and it's something that is approaching swimming, and it's one of those things that I think will be a really useful tool if people can use it. It's not going to be massively widely used because it's not going to be massively available, and I think it's going to be quite expensive. But it's the ability to see how your output changes when you're changing your stroke technique, and I think that's quite a useful thing to know. The other thing that I work with, and I know that it was mentioned last time, is I do video analysis.
Yeah.
So I'll do full video analysis sessions in an endless pool. So you're swimming on the spot. Endless pool, basically like running on a treadmill for those who haven't been in one. And it can be a bit discombobulating to start with because it's like swimming into a stream, but you're swimming very much on the spot. But from a video point of view, because you're on the spot, it makes it very easy to get video from different angles, whether it's under the water, from above the water, from the side, from the front, from directly overhead. The benefit here is not necessarily in the video itself. The video is actually most beneficial for you to be able to see what's going on. So as an athlete, if I'm talking to you, I could be telling you all these things. I can tell you, right, your hands need to go wider, you need to push past your thighs, etc., etc., etc. And you might think, well, I'm doing that. And then you look at the video and you're going, maybe I'm not doing what I think I'm doing, because we all have a skewed reality of what we think is going on because we can't see it. As a swimmer, when I was a teenager, I was quite a good backstroker. When I was a young teenager, I was fortunate enough to win a national bronze medal at 13. And then I grew by about 2 or 3 inches over the summer. And I came back to training, and my coach is telling me, your arms are going across the centre line, you're overreaching. And he was telling me, right, I need you to put your hands out wider. I want you to aim 10 to 2. I want you to aim quarter to 3, really exaggerate it. And I'm saying, I can't get my hands to go any wider. And obviously this would have been 25 years ago. So he videos me on this really old school camcorder, and I see it and I go, okay, that's that really highlights what's being said to me. And I bet I back myself as a coach to be able to communicate things, but sometimes being able to see what's going on is far more useful than being told. People are visual learners and that sort of thing, but it does make a difference.
For sure, yeah, for sure. And again, you do one-to-one coaching, which is different to a club setting. But obviously, there's many things that will relate, whether it's one-to-one or one coach with a whole group of swimmers.
Yes.
Is there any technology that you mentioned the watch and people fiddling too much?
Yes.
So you kind of already mentioned that one. Is there any other technology that you have either experienced or perhaps you've not experienced, but you can imagine would be a bit of a conflict for you as a coach if your swimmer, your athlete was just too busy with the tech, and you just want to say to them, put it away,
I'm going to say, I'm not going to say I would go completely down the line of James from last time, but I think all technology can be of conflict.
Yeah,
I think it's kind of that response. It depends. Which is the best and worst answer you can give to any question. It depends, because if you use technology right, whether it's a watch, whether it's the heart rate monitors, whether it's, these things will give you a benchmark, or they will give you a bit of speed. But if you're overusing it, then it becomes worthless, or you become reliant on it. So yeah, I think technology is a great thing if you can use it properly and not rely on it.
Yeah. We mentioned in the first half of this part 2 of the podcast these new goggles that are now on the market where you can literally
form or finish ones.
There you go. You can see the data in front of your eyes. Now, what I've sort of concluded with that is if you're going to have a pair of those, I can imagine that if you train alone, it's handy.
Mhm.
But if you train in a club setting, you've got a coach on deck, and you've got your teammates in the same lane as you. I can imagine it just is a bit of a distraction because you're no longer present. You're no longer present with your teammates and with your coach. It's that literally is getting in front of your vision.
Yeah. So I've not actually used them. I've seen them. Absolutely, I think if you're training solo, I think it's a really good thing, good way of keeping you on track.
Yeah.
And if you're doing a lot of volume swimming or you're a distance swimmer, so if you're a 1500 swimmer or 800 swimmer and you're ticking off the reps, I think it's perfect.
Yeah.
One of the things that I found, and again, this is coming from being a distance swimmer, and it probably says something about my mindset as well. When I was swimming 16, 17, 18, I could think about stroke count. I could rattle off my splits to you. I could tell you how many reps I'd done in my head. Something like these Finnis or form goal, I was swimming in a lane with 4 other people, and there were 10, 12 other people in the pool. It was a small pool. Something like these Finnis goggles or the form goggles, they're doing exactly the same, but you're not having to do the mental arithmetic to manage that. So if you are a numbers kind of person and that helps maintain the motivation or the spirit to keep going through a set or keep you switched on, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. But again, it's like everything else. Again, if you because you can't use it in a race, pool. I even for open water swim racing, I don't think you're allowed to watch, but certainly in the pool, you're not allowed to watch. So if you're relying on those splits to keep you on pace, that's not a healthy place to be when you then go and swim your 4, your 8, your 15 in the pool, because you're then cut off from your lifeline. But if you can swim with that and you can go, right, okay, I'm used to holding 120s or 115s, 110s, whatever that pace is, and you take the watch off, so then the goggles are not showing you anything, and you're still able to knock out the same paces, then maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah,
and you're not going to be looking at it whilst you're having a conversation at the end of the lane.
exactly. Yeah, and again, just to add to the the it depends kind of statement that you made earlier. It's sometimes tech can be good, sometimes it can be it's not great. Is we've been car shopping actually at the weekend, and we test drove something, and they've got parking sensors. Now it's interesting because I've spent the last 8 years without a driveway, so I've been parking on the street. Now, both me and Kirsty are amazing at parallel parking. Like find me a better parallel parker, I will wait. Because we can park in some of the tightest spots. Now, that's a skill that we've literally had to learn without parking sensors.
Yeah.
And as soon as he said, "Oh, you've got parking sensors," straight away I was like, I don't think I'd want them because I'd lose the ability to judge it for myself. And that just kind of made me think, about everything that you've just talked about there with the pacing, knowing what a pace actually feels like when you tune in to it without having it in your goggles, just basically telling you.
Yeah.
And I just sort of remember, when he mentioned about the parking sensors, the first thing I thought about was this technology podcast, which was a bit of a strange thing to think about when you're test driving a car. But
so I work part-time for a running shoe company, and the first thing I notice about anybody is what shoes they've got on their feet.
Yeah,
exactly the same. So it's what you get used to. Actually, funnily enough, we're talking about the watches and talking about whether things are good or bad. But one of the things that just reminded me, I swim a lot of fly. The fly is one of my main strokes, and I do a lot of work underwater. So if I'm doing 25s, 50s fly, even 100s in training, I'm doing probably maximum of 15 meters swimming in a length. At which point, a lot of watches don't actually record it as a length, because although in 15 meters of swimming, it might be 8 strokes. If I'm doing off a first 25, it might be 6 strokes. That doesn't register as a length a lot of the time. So there are always going to be, let's say, drawbacks or things that the technology doesn't stack up to. And the algorithms and everything else are always getting better. But that's why you can't just rely on them.
Completely agree. To take technology now to a more positive spin, because I think what we've probably done here is we've probably cautioned against a lot of technology, which is absolutely fine and makes complete sense. But the sort of final two questions that I have is, well, the first one is, what technology do you think as a coach that you could use on either on deck or that you can use in collaboration with a swimmer? What do you think would really level up your coaching and really help you out?
So one of the things at the moment I'm looking to try and use or do is probably with the video coaching is being able to sync up two cameras at the same time above and below the water.
Yeah.
Most cameras seem to communicate via Bluetooth. And the problem is underwater, you lose that connection. Now, I'm sure some people have probably managed to jerry rig or fudge together something that keeps a connection there, but that would be something that I would find really beneficial, is being able to connect two cameras so you can run them, you can sync them up, they can start at the same time, and you can get that view almost like split screen, so that you can see that, or you can play it back and have that view all the time.
That sounds really good. So, final question then. Imagine we took all the tech away.
Yep.
Do you feel like you could deliver a session of the same quality without tech, or do you think tech genuinely improves how you can coach people?
The tech definitely adds to what I can do. Like I said, I would back myself to be able to communicate to things to people. One of the things I often say when I'm poolside is it's not for someone to try and decode what I'm saying. It's for me to put it in a way that they understand. Now, that is very much easier as a one-to-one coach. And it's a lot more difficult when you are coaching a club or coaching a group in the water. But, in our club sessions with Henleys, and I'm swimming in those rather than being on poolside, Jez isn't using any technology. He does occasionally video us at points, and I think he's just got a new camera set up. I think I saw in training on Monday. But, apart from a stopwatch, he doesn't use any tech at all. And he keeps us engaged, partly with using different terminology on the board when he's writing things. So it's a bit of a cryptic crossword, which kind of goes against what I just said in terms of my communication to any swimmers. But he's not using any tech, so I don't think it's a necessity. I think it can add if it's used well, and that's the same. Video coaching is great, but just because you can video someone doesn't make you a great coach. You still have to interpret it. You still have to communicate what you want someone to do from what they've seen. So yeah, technology is great. It's a really useful thing, but it's not something to be purely relied on.
I think that's a really, really good way to finish this conversation. To sum that up, is the idea that technology can really add to your training if it's used in the right way, and if it's used with balance, so that it doesn't become relied upon. Look, really great conversation. Thank you for being part of it. Thanks to everybody who's been part of this technology conversation. Do let us know on Facebook what technology you use, how you think it really adds to your training, or if you are a technology naysayer, let us know and tell us why. So thank you to everybody. That has been Technology in Swimming Part 2. Thanks to John, and see you all soon.